Floyd came up to me. And Floyd has this great, deep Southern voice, raspy. He's like, "Sis, you okay, sis?" And I wasn't okay. I said, "No, I'm just waiting for my son's father." He said, "Well, can I pray with you?" I thought, I was so tired. We had been through so much, my sons and I. And this kind person just to come up to me and say, "Can I pray with you?" When I felt alone in this lobby.
Ms. Ross also described a very painful fight against opiate addiction that she and George Floyd shared, she said. On cross-examination, the defense pressed her on details of George Floyd's drug use, specifically an overdose incident in March, where she began to tell what happened when she brought George Floyd to the hospital.
I went to go pick Floyd up from his house that night. I thought I was taking him to work. He wasn't feeling good. His stomach really hurt. He was doubled over in pain. Just wasn't feeling well, and he said he had to go to the hospital, so I took him straight to the hospital. We went to the ER, and they were checking him out in the ER, and it was getting late, and I had to get home to my son, so I left that Friday night.
Did you later learn that that was due to an overdose?
Yes.
Object, Your Honor. Lack of personal knowledge.
Overruled.
You spent several days with him at the hospital, correct?
Yes.
And did you learn what caused that overdose?
No.
At that time frame, did you learn that Mr. Floyd was taking anything other than opioids?
No.
You did not know that he had taken heroin at that time?
No.
All right, let's bring in our Court TV colleagues, Chanley Painter, Julie Grant, and Michael Ayala. What a morning. Chanley, let's start with, not only did we learn about George Floyd's drug use from this source, but we also learned about the two people in the vehicle when officers first arrived. Maurice Hall, the passenger, according to Courteney Ross, was selling pills. And then in the back seat, Shawanda Hill, according to Ross, allegedly was selling at some point heroin.
Right. According to Courteney Ross, we are learning that the two people with George Floyd on the night that he died within his vehicle were people selling drugs to George Floyd. And Courteney Ross, she talked about to the jury how she didn't really like Maurice Hall, that he was someone that provided controlled substances to both him and Floyd when they were, quote, desperate or needed them, and that she suspected or speculated, in her own words, that it was Shawanda Hill who provided what she thought was heroin during this other new information we're learning, which was an overdose of George Floyd. He spent 5 days in the hospital in March of 2020. And what was key here on cross-examination for the defense was a lot of the same symptoms and things that we hear George Floyd say Memorial Day. He said during this overdose, according to Ross, that his stomach hurt and that he had that white foam around his mouth that we see officers point out on the Memorial Day arrest.
Michael Ayala, the prosecution knew exactly what was going to happen today. This wasn't a big secret. They wanted this out there, right? They had to get it out there because it was coming.
Yeah, they knew it was coming. They knew if they didn't call her, the defense would call her. I mean, she was a good witness for the prosecution. You know, there's no question about it. She provided that little bit of spark of life testimony. I'm sure there'll be more coming up. But she really humanized the whole opioid issue. The fact that it can happen to just about anyone, how it comes about, perhaps making him seem more sympathetic. But again, you take the risk because you know that on cross-examination, there's information that she can provide, as Chanley just pointed out, that can be hurtful to your case as well.
Julie, that seemed to be the one really moment that stood out, is the similarities between the physical conditions during, according to Courtney Ross, on the trip to the hospital during the overdose incident in March and the incident when George Floyd died, in terms of the, as Chanley pointed out, the mouth and the stomach hurts. The other one that we learned was that her nickname, the name that she had in George Floyd's phone, was Mama. Your thoughts?
Yeah, that was really another moment, Ted. I mean, wow, this testimony from Courtney Ross was just chocked full of major moments. It really was. And really for both sides, both the state and the defense. And yes, that was one of those moments I think all of us stopped what we were doing and, we're looking at the TV and going, wait a second, because we heard what he said, and I think everybody just interpreted it to mean that he was crying out for his mother. But now he could have been crying out for her, or maybe for both of them. Like she said, that was a name that he called her as well. It was a term of endearment for Courtney Ross. And then also, of course, he would refer to his mother that way as well. So it was one of those things that just, you don't always know the whole story. I think it goes back to the point we've discussed a lot on Court TV that just because we have video of an incident doesn't mean we know the entire story. It doesn't always give us a complete picture. Yes, it is a helpful picture in this case. It is a heartbreaking, just gut-wrenching picture to see at many points, that video evidence. But also there is more of a story to be told. And I think Courtney Ross really provided a lot of that with the nickname and then also with the drug use, really painting the picture of the battle with addiction that she and George Floyd were fighting at the time that he died.
Yeah, let's listen to Courtney Ross describe that moment.
Usually, opioid to me is like it's a pain reliever. It's something that is, kind of relaxing, takes your pain away. The pill, that time, it seemed like it was a really strong stimulant. I couldn't sleep all night. I felt very jittery.
You felt what?
Very jittery.
Okay. And so these were pills that were not bought from someone who you knew to have a valid prescription for Percocets.
No.
Were these pills purchased from Mr. Hall?
No.
Michael Ayala, do you think that the drug use to some people, and it's changed over the years, obviously, when drugs have affected so many people and so many families. However, there are still some people, some portion of the population that when they hear someone's on drugs, they discount them on some level. Do you think that George Floyd's character that has been built up over the first few days took a hit today?
Yeah, I think for some jurors that would be the case. There's certainly a lot of people who have no experience at all with drug culture, things that go on in the world of drugs and understanding, which is why I think this witness was so important because, again, she provided that human face, a mother with two kids struggling, finding herself in this position and how that can happen. I think that was very important for jurors to hear, whether you have experience or know someone and sort of had these issues or if you didn't. So I think those are important, but I think there's always sort of this stigma that goes along with someone who has gotten caught up in that. If you're not familiar with it, never had any struggles with it, you always look at that person as being someone who might be not necessarily a good person or that it might be their own fault. But we have a couple of people on the jury who can speak very, very educatedly to that, and I think that might be helpful. Of course, I'm speaking about the nurse in particular.
Yeah, and maybe the chemist. Chanley,
chemist, sure.
We're going to hear the battle of the experts, and this seems to be a setup, right, for what's coming later. But the bottom line is Chauvin's knee has been front and center. Now, the other potential cause of death, from the defense standpoint, drug use is now into the picture.
It is, and it makes sense for the state to broach the issue, bring it out before the jury now, and then later say why, in their perspective, it's not relevant to the cause of death, whereas the defense is taking that now and making the most on cross-examination to build a foundation step by step to their theory of the case, like you just said, is the drug intoxication as cause of death. And you're right, we're going to have experts, many experts, on both sides here talking about the cause of death, what it was it related to this or that, and there we're showing the picture. That's the ingesting of drugs. We know the defense will use that not only for the Memorial Day, have evidence of drugs ingested, but also from that previous arrest they fought hard to get in from 2019, where they will show that George Floyd actually ingested drugs, and more evidence of how that led to a paramedic, a hospital visit, and what the paramedic told him then. So yes, a lot more to come for this jury.
Yeah, and a lot, this is just beginning this case. We're 4 days into a 3 to 4 week trial. Thank you all. We're going to step aside, take a break. We'll be right back with more right after this.